Star Trek was never supposed to survive long enough to become a legend. The network rejected its first pilot, nearly canceled it twice during its original run, and the cast that generations of fans came to love almost never existed at all. What the franchise never advertised, and what most viewers never saw, was how many of its most beloved faces walked off the set in anger, got quietly pushed out the door, or left under circumstances the studio spent years carefully burying. Some exits made headlines. Others were smoothed over with polite official statements and paperwork, and a few involved personal devastation that the actors themselves only found the courage to name out loud decades after the fact. Every departure reshaped the show in ways nobody fully anticipated, and the story of what happened behind the cameras is just as much a part of the Star Trek legacy as anything that ever aired. Before William Shatner ever sat in the captain's chair, that seat belonged to someone else entirely. Jeffrey Hunter played Christopher Pike in the original pilot, The Cage, a thoughtful, philosophical episode that NBC rejected outright and called too cerebral for a mainstream television audience. Gene Roddenberry received a rare second opportunity to retool the series from the ground up, but Hunter chose not to return for it, citing reasons that were never fully pinned down. Scheduling conflicts, a general reluctance to commit to a television series, a sense that the project simply wasn't the right fit. Shatner stepped in, and Captain Kirk was born. And yet Hunter's brief presence didn't disappear. When production ran behind schedule during the first season, Roddenberry's team repurposed footage from The Cage into a two-part episode called The Menagerie, and that workaround accidentally built one of the franchise's most enduring mysteries. Decades later, Anson Mount brought Pike back to life in Strange New Worlds, turning what started as a budget-saving maneuver into a full character legacy. Hunter walked away before the show officially launched, and his shadow stretched across 50 years of storytelling anyway. Denise Crosby's departure was one she chose deliberately, and the writers sent her off in the most brutal way they could manage. Joining the next generation as Lieutenant Tasha Yar, the Enterprise D's chief of security, Crosby arrived with a strong concept behind her character, and almost no material to work with. Episode after episode, Yar faded into the background, while other crew members carried the dramatic weight of the story. That friction pushed Crosby out during the first season, and Gene Roddenberry's response was to make her exit unforgettable. Tasha Yar died without ceremony or meaning in episode 23, Skin of Evil, killed by a creature that treated her as an inconvenience. Fans were stunned. What came next, though, surprised everyone, including Crosby herself. She helped develop Sela, Tasha Yar's half-Romulan daughter, and returned to play her as a calculated political adversary to Picard. The character she'd walked away from became the foundation for a far more complex role, and the exit that felt like a rejection turned into the beginning of something richer. Will Wheaton's time on The Next Generation ended with a specific betrayal that never fully faded. Wheaton played Wesley Crusher, the teenage prodigy whose role on the show had stalled the Hollywood momentum he'd built with Stand By Me. And the problems were less about what appeared on screen and more about what was happening in the writer's room. When Wheaton landed a film role in Valmont, he asked for time off, and the production team refused, insisting the episode he'd miss was essential to his character's arc. Trusting that assessment, Wheaton declined the film, and then discovered the script had been rewritten to remove Wesley entirely. The message landed clearly. His contributions weren't valued enough to work around his schedule. That realization pushed him away from the series. Wesley Crusher returned later as a conflicted Starfleet cadet before vanishing into the company of the mysterious travelers, a fittingly strange exit for one of Trek's most debated characters. Wheaton now hosts The Ready Room, the official aftershow for modern Star Trek programming, and his relationship with the franchise has outlasted the bitterness. But the way his run on TNG ended taught him something about how the production operated, and that's not the kind of lesson that fades quickly. Michelle Forbes built Ensign Ro Laren into the blueprint for everything Deep Space Nine was designed to be. The Cardassian occupation of Bajor, the Bajoran refugee crisis, the political complexity that ran through DS9's entire 9-season run. All of it traced back to storylines that Ro Laren first gave weight and texture. Producers wanted Forbes at the center of the new series, serving as the Bajoran second-in-command aboard the space station. Forbes declined, choosing a film career over another long television commitment, and her refusal reportedly damaged her standing with the TNG production team and came close to leaving Ro without any real farewell. A scheduling gap in Season 7 revived a shelved script, and the result, preemptive strike, gave Ro one of the most charged exits in the franchise's history, as she defied Starfleet and joined the Maquis in a choice that felt completely in character. Forbes went on to 24, Battlestar Galactica, and True Blood. The role she turned down was reimagined as Kira Nerys, and DS9 built its identity around someone else's performance. Laren's influence on that entire series never went away. Terry Farrell's exit from Deep Space Nine didn't have to happen the way it did, and that's what made it so corrosive. Farrell played Jadzia Dax, a joined Trill whose centuries of accumulated memories gave her a depth and warmth that anchored the series emotionally. And by the time her contract came up before Season 7, the relentless shooting schedule had ground her down. Farrell asked for a reduced role in the final season rather than a full return, and the answer she received, primarily from producer Rick Berman and Paramount executives, was no. In later interviews and in the documentary What We Left Behind, Farrell described the negotiation process as being bullied into compliance. When compliance didn't come, she walked. Showrunner Ira Steven Behr hadn't been part of those conversations at all, and he was left furious and blindsided, forced to write Jadzia Dax's death with no preparation and no creative investment in the outcome. After leaving DS9, Farrell was cast as a lead in Becker, a sitcom produced by the same Paramount executives who had refused to meet her halfway on Star Trek. Jadzia Dax remains one of DS9's most celebrated characters, and the circumstances of her death have never stopped being a sore point for the people who love the show. Gates McFadden's removal from The Next Generation after its first season was widely suspected to trace back to her conflict with Maurice Hurley, the show's head writer, and McFadden herself confirmed it years later without much ambiguity. She had called out the scripts for the way they handled Beverly Crusher's relationship with her son, pointing specifically to the fact that a character written as a brilliant scientist was consistently bypassed whenever the male characters had something important to say. I kept saying, why is it that I've raised this genius kid, and yet every time there's anything even possibly serious, it's only the male characters that talk to him, McFadden told interviewer Michael Rosenbaum. Hurley pushed her out. Diana Muldaur came in as Dr. Pulaski for Season 2, and the audience made its feelings known immediately. Muldaur was experienced and had appeared in the original series, but she stepped into a tight-knit cast that hadn't wanted the change, and an audience already attached to McFadden. Pulaski's cool, matter-of-fact treatment of Data read as dismissive to many viewers. Muldaur later cited scheduling conflicts and fading ties to the production as her reasons for leaving after a single season, and McFadden returned in Season 3, staying through the full run of the series, the films, and Star Trek Picard. Her comeback was a course correction the show needed badly. Geneviève Bujold was hired to play the original captain of Star Trek Voyager, Nicole Janeway, before a single complete scene had been filmed. Bujold came from feature films, where pacing and preparation functioned very differently, and the pace of television production proved incompatible with how she worked. Long hours, rapid turnarounds, dense technical dialogue delivered on cue. Within days of filming the pilot, she stepped away and told producers the role wasn't suited to her. Kate Mulgrew, who had already auditioned, stepped in and reshaped the character into Kathryn Janeway, one of the franchise's most recognized captains and television's first woman to command a Star Trek series as its lead. Bujold's brief time on the production stands as a clear illustration that talent and fit are not the same thing. Persis Khambatta's path through Star Trek ran through a project that never aired. When Paramount planned a new television series called Star Trek Phase 2 in the late 70s, Khambatta, a former Femina Miss India, was cast as Lieutenant Ilya, a Deltan navigator with empathic abilities and mathematical precision, written partly to fill the space left by Leonard Nimoy's absence from the proposed cast. Multiple episodes were drafted around her. The series was then canceled before production began, and the pilot was repurposed as Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Nimoy returned, Ilia and Commander Decker were repositioned as supporting figures, and both were ultimately absorbed into the V'ger storyline, in a metaphysical conclusion that kept the original trio at the center of everything. According to Sherilyn Connolly's biography, Presenting Persis Khambatta, the actress processed the experience with more pragmatism than bitterness, though Hollywood's fixation on her shaved head consistently overshadowed the performance underneath it. Grace Lee Whitney's removal from the original series was framed as a budget decision, and the paperwork backed that story up. A casting memo from late August 1966 cited Whitney's salary, among the highest for a supporting cast member, as disproportionate to her screen time. But Whitney, who played Yeoman Janice Rand, told a different story in her memoir, The Longest Trek: My Tour of the Galaxy. She disclosed that she had been sexually assaulted by a studio executive she identified only as the executive at Desilu Studios, and she believed her dismissal followed directly from that assault, engineered to remove a witness from the building. Gene Roddenberry later expressed regret and floated the idea of bringing her back in a guest capacity, but nothing came of it for years. Whitney eventually returned in The Motion Picture and made brief appearances in films 3, 4, and 6, with a final appearance in the Voyager episode Flashback. She passed away in 2015, having found, by her own account, a measure of peace with what had been done to her. Kirstie Alley's Savick in The Wrath of Khan was precise, composed, and fully expected to return. The reason she didn't came down to an offer Paramount made that communicated clearly how much they valued her presence. In his memoir, Star Trek Movie Memories, William Shatner recalled Alley explaining the situation in plain terms. The studio's offer for the third film came in below what she'd been paid for the second, and that number told her everything. Leonard Nimoy, who directed The Search for Spock, confirmed the studio's position. They couldn't meet her price. Robin Curtis took the role for films 3 and 4 in what Shatner described as a solid performance in a thankless situation. Alley went on to replace Shelley Long on Cheers and built one of the more recognizable careers in American television. The Vulcan officer she left behind never quite carried the same weight twice. Jennifer Lien's Kes arrived on Voyager as one of its most unusual characters, an Ocampa with a 9-year natural lifespan, growing telepathic abilities, and a romantic connection to Neelix that showrunners Rick Berman and Jerry Taylor later admitted was a creative mistake from the start. The character carried genuine potential that the writing never found a way to unlock. An audience connection with Kes stayed limited across her 3 seasons. By season 4, the creative team had hit a wall they couldn't see past, and Lien's role ended in the episode The Gift, where Kes's psychic abilities spiraled dangerously out of control following contact with species 8472, and she chooses to leave the ship, transforming into pure energy as she departs. Her exit cleared space for the introduction of 7 of 9, played by Jerry Ryan, a character whose arrival reshaped the series and pushed its ratings significantly upward. The consensus among the cast was that the writing had failed Kes more than Lien ever had. Anton Yelchin died on June 19, 2016, at 27 years old, in a freak accident at his Los Angeles home. Yelchin had brought quick intelligence and genuine warmth to Pavel Chekhov across all 3 films of the rebooted franchise, the Kelvin Timeline's version of a character originally created by Walter Koenig. He had just wrapped filming on Star Trek Beyond when a 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee he'd exited rolled backward down his steep driveway and pinned him against a brick pillar and security gate. Friends discovered him when he failed to appear at a scheduled rehearsal. The coroner recorded the cause of death as blunt traumatic asphyxia. The Jeep model involved had already drawn complaints about its electronic shifter, which caused driver confusion about whether the vehicle was actually in park, and the accident intensified public scrutiny of the design. J.J. Abrams described Yelchin as kind, genuinely funny, and supremely talented. John Cho wrote that he was in ruins. Jodie Foster called him a rare and beautiful soul. The loss reverberated across the entertainment industry, but for the Star Trek community, it carried a specific weight. A young actor who had taken one of the franchise's classic roles and made it entirely his own, gone before anyone could see what he might have done next. Star Trek began as a single television series, rejected once and nearly canceled twice, and it became one of the most recognized and durable media properties in history, spanning television, film, literature, animation, video games, and even language. The Klingon tongue has been formally studied, cataloged, and spoken by linguistics enthusiasts across the world. The original science fiction series first aired on Canada's CTV network on September 6, 1966, followed by NBC 2 days later, drawing its structure and spirit from C.S. Forrester's Hornblower novels, the social satire of Gulliver's Travels, and the frame of television westerns. Gene Roddenberry designed it as both a space adventure and a platform for examining human nature under pressure. After cancellation, it returned as an animated series, then as 6 feature films, then The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, then a cinematic reboot in 2009, and then again in 2017 with streaming series including Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy. The fandom, known as Trekkies or Trekkers, has sustained it across conventions, fan productions, and decades of passionate engagement. Every actor who left, who was pushed out, or who disappeared under painful circumstances contributed something to a story larger than any single contract dispute. Their exits shaped the franchise as much as their performances did, and the gap each one left behind proved, in nearly every case, to be exactly the space something unexpected needed to grow.